Welcome to a fascinating journey into the heart of Germany, the land where some of humanity's most iconic and mysterious tales were born. Did you know that behind stories like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or Hansel and Gretel, there is more than just simple children's narratives? These tales, collected by the famous Brothers Grimm, are filled with secrets, magic, and dark undertones that few truly know. But that's not all. We will also delve into the enigmatic legend of Lorelei, a story of love and tragedy that still echoes along the banks of the Rhine River. Get ready to uncover the true origins of these tales, the details you were never told, and how these stories have stood the test of time, becoming immortal pieces of German culture. Don't miss it.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a tale filled with magic, intrigue, and timeless lessons about kindness and evil. Are you ready to dive into this German classic? Here begins the story.
Once upon a time, in the middle of winter, a queen sat by a black-framed window as she sewed. Outside, the snow fell like feathers, and as the queen absent-mindedly gazed at the landscape, she pricked her finger with the needle. 3 drops of blood fell onto the snow. Seeing the contrast of the red against the white, she wished for a daughter whose skin would be as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. Soon after, the queen gave birth to a baby girl who perfectly matched her wish, and she named her Snow White. However, the queen died shortly after the girl was born. A year later, the king remarried, this time to a beautiful woman who was proud and arrogant. This new queen owned a magic mirror, to which she asked every day, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this realm is the fairest of all?" And the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." The queen was pleased because she knew the mirror always told the truth. However, Snow White grew up to become more and more beautiful, until one day, when the girl turned 7, the mirror gave a different answer. "My queen, you are beautiful, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen was filled with envy and hatred towards Snow White. From that moment, peace left her heart. Unable to bear the existence of someone more beautiful than her, she ordered a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest, kill her, and bring back her heart as proof. The huntsman obeyed and led the girl into the forest. But when he raised his knife to kill her, Snow White's innocence and beauty moved him, and he could not do it. He said, "Run, child, run as far as you can and never return to the castle." Instead of Snow White's heart, the huntsman killed a boar and brought its heart to the queen, who cooked and ate it, believing it belonged to the girl. Meanwhile, Snow White wandered terrified through the forest, facing wild animals and sleeping on the ground. Finally, she found a small cottage deep in the woods. She entered and saw that everything inside was tiny: a table with 7 little plates, 7 glasses, and 7 small beds. She was so hungry that she ate a little bread, soup, and fruit from each plate, and then, exhausted, lay down on one of the beds and fell asleep. That night, the cottage's owners returned, 7 dwarfs who worked in a nearby mine. Upon entering, they noticed something was amiss. As they inspected the cottage, they found Snow White sleeping in one of their beds. Amazed by her beauty, they decided not to wake her. The next morning, Snow White woke up frightened to see the dwarfs, but they treated her kindly. They asked who she was and why she was there. The girl told them her story, and the dwarfs, moved with compassion, offered her a place to stay on one condition, that she take care of the house and cook while they worked. Snow White gratefully agreed. Meanwhile, the queen consulted her magic mirror again. To her horror, it replied, "My queen, you are beautiful. It is true, but in the dwarf's house, Snow White is still fairer than you." The queen discovered that Snow White was still alive and decided to kill her herself. Disguised as an old peddler, she went to the dwarf's cottage with a beautiful corset. She convinced Snow White to try it on and laced it so tightly that the girl collapsed, unable to breathe, and appeared dead. When the dwarfs returned, they cut the corset, and Snow White began to breathe again. The queen tried again, this time with a poisoned comb. Once more, in disguise, she tricked Snow White and combed her hair. The poison rendered the girl unconscious, but the dwarfs removed the comb and saved her. Finally, the queen used a poisoned apple. She cut the fruit in two. One side was harmless, while the other was filled with poison. Disguised once more, she offered the apple to Snow White, who cautiously only accepted half. Tragically, she ate the poisoned side and fell dead. This time, the dwarfs could not revive her. They wept bitterly and placed her body in a glass coffin, as her beauty remained intact. They set it on a hill and guarded it day and night. One day, a prince passing through the forest saw Snow White in the coffin and fell in love with her. He begged the dwarfs to let him take the coffin, promising to honor and care for her forever. Moved, the dwarfs agreed. As the prince's servants carried the coffin, they stumbled, dislodging the poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. She awoke. The prince, overjoyed, asked her to marry him, and Snow White agreed. The wedding was magnificent, and among the guests was the evil queen. Upon consulting her mirror, she discovered that the new queen of the realm was Snow White. Consumed by rage and envy, she attended the wedding, but was punished. She was forced to wear red-hot iron shoes and dance until she died, Snow White, and the prince lived happily ever after.
In the heart of Germany's dark forests, many of the most haunting and fascinating tales of oral tradition were born, later collected by the brothers Grimm. One of the most iconic is Hansel and Gretel, a story that blends the innocence of childhood with the dangers of greed and the cleverness needed to survive. This tale takes us to a world where courage and family unity are put to the ultimate test. Get ready to dive into the story filled with adventure and mystery. Here begins the tale.
Once upon a time, a humble woodcutter lived in the forest with his two children, Hansel and Gretel, and his second wife, the children's stepmother. The family was extremely poor, and when a great famine struck the region, they could barely find enough food to survive. One night, while the children slept, the woodcutter and his wife discussed what to do. "There's not enough for all of us," the woman said. "If we don't get rid of the children, we will all starve. We'll take them into the forest and leave them there." The woodcutter resisted, as he did not want to abandon his children. But the woman insisted so much that he finally agreed, though with great sorrow. However, Hansel, who was not asleep, overheard the entire plan. That night, Hansel silently went outside and filled his pockets with small white stones that gleamed under the moonlight. The next morning, the stepmother woke the children and told them they were going to collect firewood. As they walked, Hansel dropped the white stones along the path. When they reached the depths of the forest, they lit a fire, and the woman told them to wait there while she and their father went to gather more wood. But the parents never returned. When night fell and the moon rose, Hansel took Gretel's hand, and they followed the trail of stones that glowed under the moonlight, making their way back home. Their father received them with tears in his eyes, as he had deeply regretted his decision. However, the stepmother was not pleased and soon insisted on abandoning the children again. This time, in an even deeper part of the forest, Hansel tried to collect more stones, but this time the woman locked the house door, and he couldn't go out. The next morning, the children were taken into the forest, and Hansel, unable to use stones, left breadcrumbs along the path, hoping to follow them back. However, when they tried to return that night, they discovered that the forest birds had eaten all the crumbs. Lost and terrified, the children wandered the forest for 3 days. At last, they came upon a very peculiar house. It was made entirely of bread, with sugar windows and a roof made of cake. Starving, they began to eat pieces of the house. As they nibbled, an old woman came out of the door. "Oh, dear children," she exclaimed kindly, "what are you doing here? Come in, come in. I'll give you warm food and a bed to sleep in." The children, relieved, entered without suspecting a thing. The old woman gave them milk, bread, apples, and sweets, and prepared cozy beds for them. However, her kind appearance was only a fraud. In reality, she was a wicked witch who had built the house to lure children in and eat them the next morning. The witch revealed her true nature. She dragged Hansel and locked him in a cage, saying she would fatten him up before eating him. Then she forced Gretel to work as a servant, cooking and cleaning the house every day. The witch would ask Hansel to stick out his finger so she could check if he was fat enough. But Hansel was clever, knowing that the witch's eyesight was poor. He would show her a bone instead of his finger. Feeling the bone, the witch thought he was still too thin. After weeks, the witch grew impatient. "Fat or thin, I'll eat you today," she screamed. She ordered Gretel to light the oven and prepare it. But Gretel, equally clever, pretended not to know how. "I don't know how to light the oven, Grandma. Can you show me?" Gretel asked innocently. The witch, impatient, leaned into the oven to demonstrate. At that moment, Gretel summoned all her courage and pushed the witch inside, quickly shutting the door. The witch screamed and thrashed, but Gretel did not let her out. Finally, the witch was consumed by the flames. Gretel ran to the cage and freed Hansel. Together they explored the house and found chests full of gold and precious stones. They decided to take as much as they could carry. With their pockets full, the siblings left the witch's house and searched for the way back home. After several days of walking, they came upon a wide river. Unsure of how to cross, Gretel saw a white duck swimming nearby. She asked for help, and the duck, understanding, carried them one at a time to the other side. At last, they found their way back home. Their father welcomed them with great joy, as he had been searching for them ever since their stepmother had died. The children showed him the treasures they had brought, and with them they never went hungry again. They lived happily ever after.
Germany is a land steeped in myths and legends, evoking landscapes full of mystery and magic. One of the most captivating stories from its tradition is the legend of Lorelei, inspired by a towering cliff above the Rhine River. This legend blends beauty, tragedy, and a mystical aura that has fascinated poets, musicians, and travelers for centuries. Join me as we uncover the enchanting tale of Lorelei and her eternal song in the waters of the Rhine. Here begins the legend.
On the banks of the Rhine River, near the town of St. Gorshausen, stands a massive slate cliff called Lorelei, rising about 132 meters above the water. This spot is famous not only for its stunning beauty, but also for the mysterious legend that surrounds it. Many years ago, it was said that a young woman named Lorelei lived in this region. She was extraordinarily beautiful, with golden hair that cascaded like streams of light over her shoulders and a voice so melodious that anyone who heard it was enchanted. According to the most romantic versions of the story, Lorelei was an ordinary maiden who fell deeply in love with a young sailor who had promised to marry her. However, fate was cruel. The young man never returned, as his ship was swallowed by the waters of the Rhine during a storm. Upon hearing the news, Lorelei's heart filled with sorrow and despair. It is said that she climbed the cliff that now bears her name, searching for her beloved in the river's waters. There, tormented by grief and the betrayal of fate, she threw herself into the river and disappeared beneath the waves. However, this is not the end of the story, but rather the beginning of the legend. Shortly after her disappearance, sailors navigating near the cliff began to tell strange tales. They said that on clear nights, they could see a female figure sitting atop the cliff, combing her golden hair with a golden comb, while singing a song so beautiful and melancholy that it made them forget everything around them. The vision of Lorelei was so hypnotic that men could neither look away from her nor hear anything but her song. While under her spell, their ships would drift off course and crash into the treacherous rocks of the cliff, sinking into the Rhine's deep waters. The few who survived claimed that Lorelei had called to them with her voice, luring them to their doom. Over time, the figure of Lorelei came to be seen as a vengeful spirit, or a siren seeking to punish men for the loss of her beloved. Others, however, believed she was the victim of a curse and could not find peace. In other versions of the legend, Lorelei was not a mere human, but a river nymph or a mermaid. These stories depict her as a supernatural being who lived in the waters and climbed the cliff to watch the mortals sailing the Rhine. Some poets and writers have described Lorelei as a tragic figure, trapped between the world of the living and the dead, unable to find rest. The legend of Lorelei became even more popular, thanks to the poem written by Heinrich Heine in 1824, titled Die Lorelei. In the poem, Heine describes how a boatman is lured by Lorelei's song and ultimately falls victim to the river's currents. The poem helped solidify Lorelei's image as a beautiful, magical, and dangerous figure. Today, the Lorelei Cliff is a highly visited tourist destination. The surrounding waters are known for their strong and dangerous currents, adding a touch of reality to the legend. Additionally, there is a bronze statue of Lorelei near the site, sitting by the river and combing. Her long golden hair, just as she is described in the tales.
Thank you for joining me on this journey through the magical stories of Germany. Today, we explored the bravery of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, the cleverness of Hansel and Gretel, and the mystical beauty of the legend of Lorelei. I hope these stories have transported you to a world full of magic, mystery, and timeless lessons. But this is only the beginning. Very soon, we'll return with more tales and legends from other corners of the world. Don't forget to subscribe, give it a like, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming stories. See you in the next adventure.